In the wake of Louisiana's deadly mass shooting by a man with a history of mental illness, the question of how mental illness is treated in this country is once again up for discussion. Congressman Tim Murphy has been fighting to overhaul the system with a bill called the Helping Families in Mental Health Crisis Act. And Congressman Murphy joins us this morning. Congressman, thanks so much for being with us and for all your work on this issue.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
So the latest news reports that the shooter in Louisiana had been ordered by a judge to go to a mental health facility, but he was not involuntarily committed. And because he was not involuntarily committed, he did not show up on the background check. So bad enough for a judge to order him to go to a facility, but still not enough to show up on the background check. Does that loophole need to be changed?
Well, the problem that occurs with that is several-fold. One, you have judges who openly say it's not illegal to be crazy, which I think is derogatory and completely misses the point. It's not illegal to have a heart attack, but still we treat them. Secondly, there's oftentimes not enough hospital beds, so many times doctors and hospitals don't want to go through the hassle and the problems of dealing with an involuntary commitment. So unless the person appears to be in imminent danger, and that's a standard of harming themselves or someone else, they will not force them to have a commitment. And this is where the underlying problem occurs. Not enough facilities, not enough providers, not enough push, and you end up with people then not taking a thorough history and not understanding that if a person with a serious mental illness and any kind of history of violence, schizophrenia, bipolar, etc., is 15 times more likely to engage in an act of violence if they're not in treatment, then these are part of the standards we need to be looking at changing, so we're getting people help instead of pushing them back on the street.
To be clear, it makes it sound like this standard of involuntary commitment might not be the right one to determine if someone might be a danger. Someone with mental illness should not have a gun.
Sure. We actually have learned a lot since the 1800s, and that's when a lot of these standards were set up. A year ago this month, there was an important study released where they now have genetic markers of schizophrenia and bipolar. If you look at someone who's abusing substances, has a severe mental illness diagnosis, a history of violence, those are all huge red flags that something is amiss. And there's another thing, too. States have the ability to use something called assisted outpatient treatment with such persons. Instead of an involuntary commitment, they can have an outpatient commitment and work with them. The Louisiana legislature was the first one to really call for support of my bill, the Helping Families in Mental Health Crisis Act, because they saw a year ago there was problems occurring and they needed to do something about it. We have a long way to go, but I'm telling you what, I'm getting tired, frustrated with these moments of silence on the House floor. Look, we need to do that for the victims and give them our respects and our prayers, but the silence of Congress is deafening, and it just reaches the point where I go from frustrated to angry now that we ought to be getting up and doing something besides being silent.
How do you explain the silence?
Well, I can't explain it. I mean, it's people who I think don't understand mental illness, people who think that if only you ignore it, it'll go away. Denial is not a treatment. Ignoring it is not a treatment. And we'll have more of these instances, and I'm sorry to say that it may take more of these before the House and Senate, the White House, wake up and say, let's start dealing with this mess that we have of a very disjointed and fragmented mental health system in this country, 112 federal agencies that don't work together, barriers the federal government sets up where we don't have enough beds, laws that keep parents and family members from working together, insurance companies that aren't working on parity, a whole host of problems, and that's why my bill addresses this in a comprehensive way, not some kind of piecemeal, feel-good way that we dust up our hands and then go home for
When you say I have this bill, when you say this is an issue that I've worked on for years, frankly, and when you say there keep on being these incidents where people with mental health issues are involved in mass shootings, when you say all these things, what does leadership say? What do the people who schedule votes on the floor say?
Well, I certainly have the attention of, had a brief discussion with Kevin McCarthy, the majority leader, on this, and have been discussions with many people in the House and Senate. And what I hear from my colleagues is, let's move this bill. Now, Fred Upton, the chairman of the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has jurisdiction over this, has said in the month of August, we'll have staff working this out, working out the details, and hopefully bring this before us for a vote in September. But in the meantime, the American people have to get fired up, call their congressman, and say, get on this bill, support this. And members of Congress have to become co-sponsors so we can continue to show the energy behind this and not just keep going to funerals, but going to a vote on the floor and say we're going to do something here instead of just mourn the losses.
Moments of silence are not enough. Congressman Tim Murphy, thank you again for work, and thanks for coming on New Day this morning.
Thank you.